Good morning, all you beautiful people looking for a different perspective. My name is Dr. Patrick Flynn, and welcome to this beautiful morning show. I am so excited to be with you guys. First of all, before we get started, I'd like to thank Dr. Mitch for doing a wonderful A Different Perspective last week on ADD and other mental disorders that they have diagnosed children with. If you didn't get to watch that episode, please go back and watch it. It's always on our website at thewellnessway.com on our ADP section of that. But yes, it's been quite a venture over the last 10 days. I have been gone. I went everywhere from East Coast to West Coast to South to, back in Wisconsin, started up my venture last week with Dr. Jordan in Eau Claire, went to Bloomington, went to Phoenix, went to North Carolina, went to Texas, did I go to Texas? No, I was everywhere. Okay, I went from hot Dakota, went up to North Dakota, went down to Tennessee, and then I flew in yesterday afternoon and got to spend some amazing time with some amazing people, because not only did I have a great venture traveling all over and sharing our message, which we'll get to shortly, but the idea is this: I came back to just a wonderful situation where we have our student VIP this weekend. So we have the one and only Dr. Jeremy Maxwell here, which is also Dr. Jeremy Maxwell's birthday today and stuff, but you're gonna see him. Yes, happy birthday. You guys can clap there. I have already a studio here. As you're gonna see, Brandon's gonna turn on the camera and you're gonna see all these wonderful docs. Everybody wave your on camera to people all over the world. We got docs in from all over. Student doctors that came from a lot of the chiropractic colleges across the U.S. that way, from everywhere from Atlanta to Davenport to Minnesota to St. Louis. Who else we have? Florida, everything that way. So we have wonderful students. You'll see them here as you saw them on camera. They're here training this weekend. So I came, they got in before I did. They're even staying at my house and stuff like that before I did. So we got Dr. Laura here, Dr. Jordan's here. We have Dr. Jenny's also here, Dr. Devin, Dr. Gates. We have docs in from training all over the country, these students this weekend. So we're very excited. So we have the student VIP this weekend. But yes, so much good stuff happened. You can always watch us on our website. As you can see over our website here, thewellnessway.com. You can actually see the fact that we have all of our stuff put up there on a regular basis, from all the training videos to everything that way. You see our Journey series, which has been great. We have been getting massive hits from all over the world on our website because people are searching on information. And as I go around and speak, it's kind of great because I can honestly tell you that the majority of people that have been there, that show up at my seminars, are people that have actually went to the website and seen all the great information. And it's fantastic hearing the stories when you go out there and say, Doc, my life changed because I watched one of your videos that really impacted me and gave me such a different perspective that started my journey very differently than it actually has been everywhere else. So it's nice to be back here sharing this great information. Now, to remember, it's kind of cool. We actually have still some of our media left that way. There we go. We have some of our media left. We actually have, because the ones I didn't kicked off yet, I still have a different YouTube page. We have the Wellness Way YouTube page, and then we have the Wellness Way Journey page that way of our Facebook, and go on there. But also, I actually been liking it. I actually been on Twitter. Haven't gotten too many fights on Twitter yet, though. So that's been kind of nice. I have our Twitter, Dr. Patrick Flynn. And it's kind of nice because having those media allows me to have outputs to you guys and stay connected besides. But remember, nothing beats our website. The Wellness Way website, we get so many hits across the world, which I'm so excited about. We get the opportunity to travel different parts. I have a little bit of travel, not with the Hormone Connection Seminar, because we're going to get that in a second, but just from other countries that want me to come speak and actually share this kind of information with you that you guys get to watch live every Saturday. Now, that being said, the last time that I was here, I showed the chart of my speaking schedule. But guess what? It's gotten down to a minimal now. I only have 4 Hormone Connection Seminars left before it's all done. You're saying I'll be in Michigan, I'll be in Portland, I'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I end up with Pensacola, Florida, where Dr. Devin is here right now. That's going June 10th, may be my last ever Hormone Connection Seminar. At the last 10 of them I've done, I kind of shared that with people, and I've gotten some long emails and some long things saying, Doc, that seminar changed my life, it changed my husband, it changed my wife, it changed my perspective on so many things that they were just like, I can't believe you're ending it. It's just a season of life, guys. Trust me. It's just a season of life to where our company is going global. And honestly, I do like to come see everybody across the world. I do like seeing our docs at different cities that way. But being here, being in Green Bay is special to me. I love my town. I love being here with all the people that I will get to work with every single day. And so I'm just taking a season, you know what I'm saying? Now I said, just remember, even Garth Brooks came out of retirement. You know what I'm saying? You know, he went away for a while, but he came back. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not saying I am. You know what I'm saying? So these 4 may be my last ever seminars. It's something I put my heart and soul into over the last 5 years. And actually, I have to thank someone. Someone said, you know, who actually got you to speak on hormones? Because before that, I never spoke. I don't know if people don't realize this. I never spoke and traveled before until actually one woman was in my room getting adjusted one day, and she isn't even from here. She just came down from Michigan because she wanted her consult in person, and I've been taking care of her for years. And she sat down with me, and she said, listen, she goes, you know, it's helped me, and she had a very sick daughter. I'll give you a little story background there. Her daughter was very sick, and her daughter is actually a Christian artist that travels all over the world and sings, and she's got records out there. It's fantastic, and she was really sick. Well, she came into here, and it changed her life. It really did. It dramatically changed her life. And so, because I was always focused on clinical outcomes. And it was interesting because then, obviously, she came under for care that way. And now this is probably 2 years later. Her daughter's traveling all over, doing wonderful. Christian artists taking off like crazy, records out there, phenomenal. And she said, listen, she goes, the things that you've done and hormones, you should really share that. And I was like, I don't want to do it. And so what ended up happening is she convinced me. She said, listen, she goes, I know you love being in the room. Because I can honestly tell you, till I started speaking a little bit, I was at full-time in that consult room, in that adjusting room, taking care of people every single day. I was only about 3 years ago that I really backed off on it. Otherwise, that was always my focus. And then what happened is the seminar got so big, I ended up taking a little bit off of practice that way and really getting back into, you know, sharing the message that way. But I can honestly tell you, the one woman looked at me and she goes, you need to share this information. Just like when Brandon came to me and said, you need to get on media. And I was resistant to both. I really was. I was like, forget that stuff. I don't want to do it. Yeah, I really was. And so that's why I remember, I mean this sincerely, sometimes you may not want to do something, but some other people have some really good ideas. You know what I'm saying? And they can see stuff that you can't. I still to this day, that's why I know what I do well, and I just stay out of everything else in my company. I may own the company, but I let them make decisions because they can sometimes see things that I can't. So it's kind of cool. So I have to thank Shelly. Her name is Shelly. She sat there and said, you need to teach on hormones. I'm like, okay. And she goes, and you're funny, so make it funny. I'm like, all right. And so I literally sat down and I started writing it. And the first time I ever did it, I did it in Green Bay. And I actually, at my old office, my waiting room was pretty huge. I could fit about 150 people in there, and it got packed out. I was like, wow, people really want to know about this stuff. And then, of course, then there was the aspect of there's people in there that there's a pastor and asked me to speak at his church and blah, blah, blah. And that's how sometimes I end up speaking at churches on that way. But yeah, so it's kind of cool because they said, listen, what you're sharing really gives a different perspective. And that's when I even created this nice little side that really does it. Because when you go out there, and I can honestly tell you, especially with even COVID over the last couple of years, I know it's a little hard to see on the screen here, but if you look, it's like people go, oh my goodness, you know, they go, it's a circle, it's a square, it's a circle, square. It's all about your perspective. It's the angle that you're looking at things. That's why the show itself is called A Different Perspective. You're coming at such a different angle because people get really frustrated. I mean, really frustrated. And that's why I use the example of fire department carpenter. People are so trained in the fire department viewpoint that they're all about fires putting out. And all my docs and students and everything like that, we're looking going, well, there's things that cause fires. I need to rebuild the house. It's a totally different perspective, even using the same house. So it does, but people get downright ticked off when you have a different perspective. Really do. That's why, once again, that's why the show has been reported, you know, stuff like that, and they try to take it down and kick me off the media. I get it. I totally get it. Because the majority of people are actually trained in such a perspective in medicine that if you speak anything else, they just lose their freaking mind. Right. You guys experience that. I always warn these docs. I said, listen, it's exciting seeing what we do, but man, the uphill battles that you deal with every day, but on top of it, what happens is just even within your own family. Man, I mean, for all you guys watching it right now, you know, do me a favor, raise your hand if you had a disagreement with your family over what COVID was supposed to do over the last 2 years. Look, everybody raise their hand. Like, heck, it happened last week. You know, saying, especially all stuff that way. We won't even get into the monkeypox and all that stuff that just came out that they're doing on there. So, you see that one now? Yeah. Crap, I might be banned now just from saying monkeypox, okay? But yeah, I'll be doing that live probably on Monday covering that. But anyways, long story short, when you have a different perspective, it really can not only be very inspiring for some people, but it can actually make people downright mad on the other things because people believe dumb crap. Do you ever notice people believe dumb shit all the time? They really do. I mean, it's like, it just drives me nuts. I'm like going, you really believe that? Oh my goodness. You know what I'm saying? And you don't believe me. I mean, you think I'm joking? Just in general, I know this is going to tick some people off. Look at all different religions. Do you know what I'm saying? Some pray to Buddha, some pray to Muhammad, some pray to things that, you know what I'm saying? I mean, there's literally been wars over this over the centuries and stuff. I'm like, you think people don't take their beliefs to death? They really will. So you try to change a healthcare perspective on a little bug or hormones, people lose their freaking mind. That's cool. I'm okay with that. I'm actually okay with that as long as there's no forced stability, and that's why I'm for liberty and freedom. Because I don't care what religion you like. I have mine. I'm cool. You know what I'm saying? And I'm willing to die for it, meaning the fact that it's like, I'm never going to force anybody to do something that way. But if someone put a gun to my head and said, you don't believe in Jesus, I'm like, well, shoot me. That's just me. I'm like, cool. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I'll take that to the death. Now, will I try to force anybody on things I believe? Absolutely not. Just like this show. It's a different perspective. I'm going to share some ideas. And I've always said, I'm kind of like a virus. I'm more like mental herpes. You know what I'm saying? Once you get it, it just sticks with you. You know what I'm saying? You just can't. I know how many people have hated what I said, but it just ran around in their mind. So I said, I'm like the cold sore herpes, not like the general herpes though. Okay? So it's like, yeah, I don't know why people watch this show. I sit there and go, why do people watch this shit on me? And I go, my analogies. But the cool thing is this. It's like you plant that idea in the head. Did I ever tell you guys, I don't know if you guys know this, one of my favorite movies of all time is Inception. You ever watch that? I'm not a fan of Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, he's a fantastic actor. He's got a kind of messed up beliefs, but that's okay. We can have a different perspective. And the idea is this. It's like, but oh my goodness. You ever see that movie Inception? You plant an idea in their head, and what it does, it'll change the whole direction of their life. And they had to go deep in the subconscious and into the dreams and plant something in their head. And it changed it. And they even said it changed the direction of this young man was going to take his company. And I'm like, you know something? That's what we need to do with healthcare. So I actually work so much on analogies and things like that. And the communication, I was asked by some student doctors yesterday, it's like, how do you communicate with people? It's all about analogies, all about understanding. It's all about stories, you know what I'm saying? So that's why when people say, this happens all the time when you're a doc like us. Someone will come in with breast cancer, we're gonna talk about in just a second. Someone will come with other condition. And because it's such a different perspective, people actually try to argue with it. I'm like, okay, go talk to this woman that said she could never have a child, and now she has 3 kids. Go talk to this person that said that this is the only way of doing care, and they come to us and it's a different perspective. So you can't take away that experience. Remember that. Because here's what happens. And now, but get ready for this. And so that's why when any of you guys are talking about anything that you ever learned from here, you gotta remember that when you actually share it with somebody, they can't take it away from you. They can't. And then when they can't argue the experience or somebody else's experience, because actually, no joke, here's what happened. This is a perfect example. I've never met this woman. It's gonna sound funny. She was my second toughest fertility case ever in history. Multiple surgeries, almost ripped out her thyroid, just horrible, okay? And her name is Hillary. And do you know she's been under my care for about 5 years. And when I met her, her eyes were bulging out. She was infertile. They wanted to rip her thyroid out, massive hyperthyroidism, just in horrible, horrible health. And no joke, and she was in her late 20s, all right? Now she's in her early 30s. And essentially because what happened is this. They said, you can't have a baby. When you rip out thyroid, there's nothing you can do. Nothing. Well, actually, I tested her, obviously much different than her current endocrinologist and other doctors did. And then guess what happened? We ended up taking care of her. No joke. Whole autoimmune condition, reversed, labs went down, all the antibodies went down. And guess what? I love watching her Instagram as her and her husband are rolling around with their 2-year-old baby and stuff, okay? And it's kind of great. And no joke. And she tells the story like crazy, tells what her other doctors in their perspective was, and tells what our perspective was. And people will argue with her. They'll argue with her going, you're going to argue with me considering the fact that this was doctor. And then what happens is when they can no longer argue the message, they have to attack the messenger. Do you follow me? Well, he's just a chiropractor. He just this, he just this. It's like, okay, cool. You know what I'm saying? That's your biggest defense. You know what I'm saying? That's why if you notice, when they talk about gender, are you a biologist? No, just look down. You have a penis or vagina, you can tell what sex you are. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not that difficult, you know? We're all biologists that way. So, and I know that once again, that's a perspective that people actually go nuts over because they're worried about offending people. My goodness. What is it, the fact of our world that you can't be offended by anything today? It just drives it nuts. Because when you give a different perspective, there's always gonna be some form of offense. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and that's okay. So, that going forward, as last week, or 2 weeks ago when I was here, I did my series on breast cancer. Thank you. I received over 1,000 messages just alone no joke, it's kind of funny. I actually recently had somebody reach out to me from a talk show about it that way. They're like, you know something? When I sat down, just listed your concepts, your perspective on breast cancer, it was quite enlightening. Would you possibly be interviewed? I'm like, sure, interviews are cool. You understand? Because I would actually enjoy sharing that perspective. So as we get into our breast cancer series, just remember, what we're going to do is this, is we're going to take this in parts. We're taking it in parts big time. Now today, it's kind of nice because I literally just got back yesterday afternoon. So I know it sounds funny, when I'm traveling and stuff like that, it's hard to put together my other presentations. So no joke, I'm gonna go through just some things a little bit here today. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch over and our nurse practitioner, Nicole, actually recorded part 2. So I'm gonna go into one of my favorite labs to set up the whole thing. And then she's gonna go through, and once again, remember, she came from the medical world. She really did. But what will we have to do? When she came here, she'll tell you I had to change her perspective because then now when she goes forward, even being a pediatric nurse like she was before, when she talks about cancer, you're going to see this is the perspective we have, even if you have a certain different form of treatment. And I'm going to talk about the opinions that doctors give to you. So let's do this. So as we're talking about breast cancer, I want to actually go to a very popular website, and because I want to kind of walk you through some of this, just breastcancer.org. Okay, it talks about breast cancer facts and statistics. Now, I'm going to read this for you because it's on the website. You can actually go to the website and check this out. It's pretty, I mean, actually, I like what they say, but then because of how they perceive breast cancer, they're going to give you their opinions, okay? Now, once again, let me state it very clearly. The majority of stuff, the majority of science, even the stuff I give you, is actually opinion. Remember that. You know what I'm saying? It's actually an opinion. Because once again, now if they try to negate your opinion by credibility, but when you have a different perspective, here, it's like this. You put 6 immunologists in a room, and I know a bunch of them. Because the way they're trained, the way they think, they're all going to come up with the same opinion. And then you come to somebody that has a different perspective on the immune system, they're going to come with a different opinion. The cool thing is this. I'm cool with both opinions, as long as you're not forced to choose one. And we've seen over the last 2 years, there's been people trying to force stuff, okay? So let's see what breast cancer is. Breast cancer is an uncontrolled growth of breast cells. Okay, that's a little debatable, but let's go on. To better understand breast cancer, it helps to understand how any cancer cell develops. I do like that, because if you figure out the development, you can kind of attack this in a different way. Cancer occurs as a result of mutations or abnormal changes in genes responsible for regulating the growth of cells and keeping them healthy. Let's stop right there, okay? That I do like, okay? I do like that. I do like the fact that what they're talking about here when they talk about keeping the regulation, responsibility, and keeping them healthy. The genes are in each cell nucleus, agreed, which act as the control room of each cell. Normally, the cells in our body replace themselves through an orderly process of cell growth. Healthy new cells take over as old ones die out. But over time, mutations turn on certain genes and turn off others in a cell. That changed cell gains the ability to keep dividing without control or ordering, producing more cells just like it or forming a tumor. There's so much truth in there, but you're going to find out. Because they have a certain perspective, I don't like some of the language on here because it's not uncontrolled. For example, here's what happens. The skin cells that I woke up with yesterday morning, guess what happens? Where are they? They're on the ground. They shed like crazy that way. There's a controlled mechanism of growth, okay? And once again, if there's too many cells, and that could even turn to melanoma and different cancers, it's not uncontrolled. There has to be a signal to that gene. Do you follow me in that? You understand? So there's a reason. See, they look at the body very differently. They say, Doc, what's the biggest perspective that separates you from medicine, from integrative, from functional medicine, which are all different perspectives? They are. I think all of them are the same perspective. They always treat the body like it makes mistakes. And I know it's a hard concept for doctors to grab, but the body doesn't make mistakes. Actually, it's just trying to survive all the crap that we do to it inside and externally that way. And that's the premises that the Wellness Way actually hold on dearly, because when you look at the body from making mistakes all the time, you're just like, you're trying to think of it like it's a machine. And it's like, just replace a part or do these things. That's not true, because your body's always trying to survive. Don't agree with me? Do me a favor. Everybody hold their breath. I'll come back in 10 minutes. Your body will force you to do it. Do you understand? It seems like a simple example, but let's say it was in it's Dr. Jeremy's birthday. You're going to see him in a little bit. It's so Dr. Jeremy, he happened to turn 28 today and stuff. So Dr. Jeremy and I are born in the same year. He's 48. I'll be 48 coming up in August. We have just a little side note. We have a 1974 club. We have like 10 docs that are born in 1974. It's kind of cool. For some reason, we all are around the same age. So I'll be 48 here coming up in August, but he's 47. Happy to one of my best friends in the world, Dr. Jeremy. And but it's kind of funny. Oh, I have no idea. I lost my train of thought now. It's like, where was I just at that one? Students, you remember? They're not even paying attention. Oh, breast cancer. Okay. All right, back to my point down there. I totally lost my train of thought and stuff like that. He's sitting right here making me laugh that way, so I totally lost my train of thought. Anyway, somebody remembers, they can type in the comments below. But, yes, I actually totally lost my thought. It's fabulous, I know. Everybody rewind and then replay it that way. Oh yeah, there you go. There you go. But if Dr. Jeremy and I, on his 48th birthday, we decided, let's say it was January right now, and we decided to jump out in a Speedo outside, okay? Guess what happens? Our body's gonna actually pull all the blood to its core, to its vital organs, do everything that way, because you know why? It's gonna say, listen, I gotta survive your dumb mistake. What was your dumb mistake? And it's gonna turn on genes to where everything works, the thyroid's gonna kick in, and if it could not adapt to that stress outside, we'd die instantaneously. If your temperature would drop within a couple degrees, you would die. Was that a mistake? No, your body's gonna do it, and so it does. It'll literally get rid of your fingers and toes and pull the blood here to survive. The body doesn't make mistakes. It's surviving to all the things that we're doing. No joke. I know it sounds funny. There's EMF coming from this computer. You understand? That's not good. So the body's going to try to adapt to it that way. And if some cells change and stuff like that, guess what happens? It's just trying to survive. And that's why it kind of clumps them in a loop, and that's why we have body's immune systems respond to it that way. We have all these great defense mechanisms to try to survive those things. So that's the major premise that really does. So when I read stuff like this and go, uncontrolled, not really. Okay, when they kind of code out. But I do love the fact that mutations do happen. I agree with that. I can show you mutations like crazy. Can turn on genes and turn off others. That's true. See, what happens is your genes respond to what's happening. You know what I'm saying? And it's trying to survive the aspect. But let's go on a little bit farther here. Okay, here we go. Breast cancer is always caused by genetic abnormalities. Now it says this right on their website. Here it is, a mistake in genetic material. With that perspective, they will never not only take the time to figure out what causal factors are, they'll say, you have no control. And I'm sorry, especially we've seen this in responsibility aspects of the world today. People don't want to take responsibility for anything. Do you know what I'm saying? And so this way, it's a mistake, so you have no determining factors which you can do to prevent it or even deal with it once you get it. However, only 5 to 10% of cancers are due to abnormality inherited from your mother or father. Instead, 85 to 90% of breast cancers are due to genetic abnormalities that happen as a result of aging process and the wear and tear of life in general. Okay, but that's not a mistake. Brandon, come back. It's not a mistake. Do you understand? I agree. It's kind of like they put two things, saying two opposite things right in the same aspect. So I'd rather have them say breast cancer is always caused by a genetic abnormality based on the things that happen that you do while you're aging and the wear and tear of your body, because now that gives you an aspect of responsibility and control. Do you understand? And so that's one thing I want to really get in, and that's the difference in perspective that goes there. It's so incredibly thing. Because you know what? Then you go down a little farther. And let's go down a little bit farther in the facts. These are steps every person can take to help the body stay healthy as possible, such as eating a balanced diet, maintain a healthy weight, not smoking, limited alcohol, exercise regularly, learn what you can do to manage breast cancer risk. Well, these may have some impact on your health. Again, breast cancer, they cannot eliminate the risk. Developing breast cancer is not your or anyone's fault. Feeling guilty or telling yourself breast cancer happened because of something you or someone else did is not productive. Yes, it is. It's very productive. Because here's what happens this. What they're basically giving is you're giving your doctor an out. I want you to think this perspective. I mean this sincerely. Okay, and obviously I like to use dramatic examples. But ladies, you're usually under care of a doctor pretty much your whole life. Went for a pediatrician to general practitioner, you might have an OB, might have a gyno, might have stuff like this. And if you're 50 years old and you're under all these cares of a doctor and they're telling you, come to me, we'll do these things for you, we keep you healthy, and all of a sudden you develop cancer at 50 years old, I'd walk up and punch that doctor in the face. What the hell did I come to you for all these years, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got cancer. And then but here happens this, but if they can blame it on your genes, then they're not responsible. Because they're saying, come to me, I'll take the responsibility of making you healthy. And therefore, when you get it, it's genes. I have no responsibility. Now let's send you to another doctor that thinks like us and beat the shit out of you and all the other therapies they have. That's healthcare? Sorry. We need a different perspective on this. You understand? Because you think I'm joking, that's the majority of people. That's 99% of the people out there. Well, my doctor said, didn't your doctor take care of you for 20 years and you're sick? Why are you listening to them? That's like going to a mechanic and your car is always broke down. My goodness. I'm sitting there going, we need a different perspective when it comes to this stuff. And that's why I find it funny. Keep on scrolling down here. Get in a second opinion. Because you know what the first thing they gave you was? An opinion. Do you understand? Doctors don't give you facts. They look at the stuff and go, here's my opinion. And if you disagree with it, you go get a second opinion. Disagree with that, get a third opinion. What is everybody giving you? An opinion. Now, here we go. You may feel a sense of urgency about getting your treatment started right away. But usually there is time to get a second opinion from another doctor. A second opinion may give you peace of mind by confirming your original diagnosis, or another doctor may recommend treatment options you may not have considered. You can get a second opinion at any point in the treatment plan process, even if you've already started treatment. I want you to think about this. Do you understand? They even tell you right away that another doctor with the same cancer, same field, everything, may have a totally different form of treatment. That's what I'm saying. You're going, your doctor said this. Okay, go get a bunch more opinions from it that way. Now, they're wrong. If they're all trained in the same opinion, it's going to still be some form of medical treatment that way. But no, let's do this and let's do this. I watch medical people fight like crazy over their opinions. And then what they try to do is just use their, well, you work at Cleveland Clinic, we like our Mayo, so we're smarter over here. You ever notice that? Even in medical field, they try to pull their expertise based on that stuff. I'm like going, well, you're all wrong because you have a different perspective. You understand? I'm going to give you a different opinion. It's totally different than you're going to get from there. But see, we live in a world that doesn't want that kind of opinion because they want to take away some stuff. So I'm going to give you some of my opinions based on something. But see, my opinions are always based on things that make so much sense. So we're going to do this because it's going to floor you that I've said this before. Medical research and medical practice never match up. There's so many amazing things. Wait till Nicole brings you through some of the stuff that we do. And she's going to show you even some of the stuff that they do medically. That actually, if you do certain medical treatments for a certain time, it can be detrimental to you. It really can. And she's done a wonderful job. I watched the video, it was kind of great. And but I'm going to kind of go through this when it comes down to what kind of do. Because you know something? I have some favorite labs that I like to use. So here's my favorite never used test for cancer patients. Now, what I mean it's never used by the medical field. Never. I can honestly tell you, we run it all the time. But what happens is this, when I actually found this lab a long, long time ago, because I was going to deal with some cancer people that way, I was like, okay, here's a good thing to monitor that way. Because what's really funny? If anybody gets diagnosed with cancer, here, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, some hormone therapy, which one do you want? There's your options. And do you ever notice that, for example, that tumors all grow at a different rate? There's some tumors you get that never grow at all. They're very slow growing. And that's why it's kind of funny. You'll see somebody that has a tumor that all of a sudden they go in for some other thing and they find a massive tumor like this. It's huge. It's like going, oh my goodness, and it's been there for years and years and years. And there's people that, once again, that grow extremely fast and can die pretty fast from that way. So I'm going to go over, once again, one of my favorite labs because I want you to see this. Because it's really simple. It's something I run on most women for multiple reasons, but you will see it when I actually put it up here, okay? It's called CEA, the carcinoembryonic antigen. I love that lab. But let's see what WebMD and the Medical Cancer Center says about it that way, because I think you'll really get some insight on it. And I even love their language when they talk and describe the lab. Here it is. Doctors don't always see obvious signs of cancer growth after a diagnosis. They need to hunt for clues. Oh, I like that. They need to dig. Is this cancer growing fast? Is it growing slow? What does it do it? They need to hunt for clues. One way they can do it is with the carcinoembryonic antigen. It measures the protein called CEA in the blood. People with some types of cancers have higher than normal levels of this substance. This test helps your doctor find out if yours has grown or whether your treatment has worked. Okay? That's quite interesting. And I even asked people that went through cancer treatment, I'll say, did you get your CEA done? Now you say, well, why'd they be important? Because it tells you if it's growing. And it tells you how fast it's growing. Do you understand? I'm going to show you some labs that will freak you out, okay? Because people say, Doc, do you ever tell people that medical treatment might be needed? I'm going to show you just in a second. Here we go. So let's go over the lab a little bit more in detail here. Okay, here it is. CEA, a type of protein in the blood. Babies in the womb have high levels of, okay, Brandon, come back to me for a second. See, if you think about it this way, the reason why this is high in children that ends about a year old, the CE starts to go down about a year old, is because they're producing so many cells. they're rapidly growing. They're growing like crazy. They're producing billions of cells every single day, and they're growing like crazy. So after about 1 year, it slows down, but it can still have an elevated level because that's why it's called carcinoembryonic. So that's why sometimes a woman's pregnant, guess what happens? This protein jumps up high in their blood, so that's why it's not used as a pregnancy test, but sometimes women find out they're pregnant because they got it, and they're like, oh my goodness, do I have cancer? And they find out they're pregnant. All right, here we go. After birth, levels drop way down. Healthy adults have a very low level, but some types of cancers can cause it to rise. Your doctor can use this as a marker to learn more about your cancer. That right alone should give some peace of mind if you actually start to measure this one. The test can often help predict whether a cancer is growing or spreading to other parts of your body. It can also help to tell how well your treatment has worked and predict your outlook. Hold the phone right there. Do you understand? People are so scared during cancer treatments or actually even what to do. And on top of it, what's my outlook going forward, doc? And they say, well, statistically, I don't want no stats. I want to know what's for me. Because I'm not this person, I'm not this person, I'm this person. I want some individualized care that says, what's my risk of this coming back? Well, CEA, it gives a good predict outlook because if it starts to elevate, that thing's growing all over again. Okay, here we go. Your doctor might give you CEA tests if you're diagnosed with bladder cancer, breast cancer, colon, lung, ovarian, pancreatic, stomach, thyroid, most of the cancers. If you look at what they talk about when it comes to labs out there, here we go. There's one of the things that you can look up at. We're going to use one of them, South Florida, and here we go. High levels. Here we go. High levels of CEA, once again, show breast cancer, cancers in reproductive tract, colon, lung, pancreatic, thyroid. Higher than normal CE levels cannot diagnose a new cancer. Further tests is needed. An increase, though, once again, can also happen in other conditions, but you see what they are. High metastasizing cancers, high metastasizing diseases that way. Now, it's quite interesting because I want to show you some patients, okay? Because this is what happens in our world here. As we're going through some things that way, look at down below in the red. CEA, you want to be less than 3.5. They're at 76.0. Student doctors, think about that, 76.0. If you want to be less than 3, yeah, I know, you see the eyes. Guess what happens? If you see up in the age bracket, this male is 52 years old. This was prostate cancer. 76 higher than 3. Now, sorry, that thing is growing and spreading like crazy. There's going to be some form of medical treatment that's needed. Do you understand? See, people come in and go, doc, do I need to go through chemotherapy, radiation, cancer? I'm like, man, you don't get it under control. That may spread and grow at such a rate. You may not survive long. You understand? So you think that I don't sometimes have to look at a person and go, yeah, I'm sorry. Chemotherapy and radiation might be your best option. I'm not saying that you don't do other things. I'm saying when it looks at what needs to be done, you may need some congruent care because your growth is so rapid, you might not be able to stop it. You understand? Once again, here's another one, okay? Now, if you notice, it's kind of crazy. Bad immune system, other things like that, 76, okay? Once again, look down below. You know, if you look at the whole lab, their immune system is bad. So once again, chemotherapy and radiation are trying to do, and surgery are trying to do what the immune system is supposed to do. So we can congruently work with them to build their immune response, to get it back to normal, why they're doing some things. But like I said, 76, and this one is just massively elevated that way. Now, here's one that recently came in. Look at this one. Recently, look at 1/5/22. This was just not even a couple months ago. Now, once again, this is one of my docs, 50-year-old female. Here we go, 144. That's a bad day. Do you understand? That's a bad day. Because when you look at those labs going, oh my goodness, it's metastasizing at such a massive rate. And that's why when you start looking up all the major cancer networks. So no joke, I'm pulling out all the cancer references that way. And you say, doc, it's so common because even look at it. It tests you to monitor a person before and during treatment. Along with other tests, this test may be used to see how treatment is working. And in some cases, it may be used with other tests to see if cancer has grown or come back. Man, if you had cancer, even if you're just watching the show for the first time, I'd want to measure this every year the rest of my life because if I see some growth coming back, there's tumors that are growing that you may not pick up on other things because there can be such small cells, they're starting to release this protein in your blood and you can actually see what's going on with it that way. That's why I said, you look at the National Cancer Institute, a substance found in your blood, helps with colon cancer and other types of cancer diseases. Who smokes? C levels may keep track of how well cancer treatments are working or if cancer can come back, this type of tumor marker. See, all of the research keeps on showing, okay, it's a great thing to monitor the growth of the cancer, if it's going to come back, how it's going to do. Is it growing too fast? Is it growing slow? You can actually have a tumor, and guess what? You can be at 0.5. And what I get frustrated with is they will treat a person that has 0.5 and 76 the same because their perspectives we just got to go and destroy it. Well, maybe that's a little bit aggressive because you can sometimes cause more hurt than good. But there's things that you could do that would be a little bit of a different option that way. But because you don't have that perspective, they say if you even talk that way, they will use fear to try to get you to do something. Now, that being said, there's so many things that can be done. And what we're going to do now is we're going to actually go over to Nicole. She did a wonderful recorded video that way. Then we're going to come back and we'll end our show shortly. But we're going to enjoy Nicole's as she went through as she did part 2 for me of our breast cancer series. And she's going to give a general understanding and a perspective of cancer that's well documented. It's just not used in major medicine that way. And that's why people like us and other people that do forms of care trying to give them different perspective will really blow your mind away when she's all done. So here we go. So let's enjoy Nicole's version of giving you some update of what cancer is.
As you know, Dr. Patrick Flynn started a series on breast cancer. And so he asked for me to come on and kind of help to, solidify that foundation for what cancer is. And he's going to be diving into more and more with the weeks to come about the different receptors and the ins and outs specific to breast cancer. And so I am honored to be able to talk with you this morning about some of the hallmarks of what makes cancer cancer cells, and how to properly test your body to see if you may be at risk. And so, unfortunately, cancer is at an all-time high. We are seeing statistics now where they are thinking that 1 in every 2 men and 1 in every 3 women will eventually have a cancer diagnosis. And so personally, me and my practice, I've seen a huge flood of cancer people in the recent months. And it's just very, very sad because a lot of people don't trust Western medicine or different modalities anymore. So they're coming for a different perspective. So this morning, what I'm hoping to do with you is to give you some further education and some understanding of our approach, the Wellness Way approach to cancer, what makes it so unique, and things that we can actually do about it. So we have breast cancer, part 2. And before we get started, I want to talk about the somatic theory versus the metabolic theory. Western medicine, the way that they have it right now, primarily makes their decisions on the somatic theory, which means that cancer is a linear process, progressively accumulating mutations until it grows a tumor, which must be removed to prevent metastasis and death. So with Western medicine, the model right now is they make tumors the bad guy. And I'm here to tell you right now, a tumor actually saved you or your loved one's life. Now you might say, Nicole, that's crazy. What do you mean a tumor saved my life? No, a tumor has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And in which case I say, remember, with the Wellness Way perspective, your body does not make a mistake, but rather it responds to its environment. So what happens is when you create a tumor, if your body had not created a tumor is your way of taking all those abnormal cells and putting it in one spot. If it hadn't have made that, those abnormal cells would be going rogue all over your body. And before you know it, you would have been dead a whole long time ago. And so that tumor is actually your body's way of protecting you, keeping those abnormal cells in one spot to prevent metastasis and to prevent the further destruction of disease. But what doesn't change is the environment that helped to grow the tumor in the first place. You guys, cancer is not a tumor. It's a process. It's not unavoidable bad luck. You're not just going to go through, I think a lot of times Americans just kind of go through their day-to-day. They're eating whatever they want, drinking whatever they want, smoking whatever they want, ingesting different toxins and being exposed to all these different things within the environment and just waiting for cancer to happen to them. But cancer isn't unavoidable bad luck. If you know enough about how to strengthen your body and truly make it healthy, then there are things that you can do to prevent it in the first place. A lot of times when a cancer patient comes into my office and sits down and I ask them kind of to tell me about their story, a lot of the times that they'll say is, well, I was really healthy until I got cancer. Newsflash, if you got cancer, that is a sign of an unhealthy body. And I know that that probably is going to make people feel a little bit uneasy. And well, what about childhood cancers? And what about my baby that had cancer? You know, I was a nurse extern at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, the biggest children's research hospital in the world. We had the most complex cases from all over the world that either stopped responding to treatment or they were trying different clinical trials or different things at St. Jude. And, you know, I was tore up having to go home at night giving a 6-month-old baby chemotherapy. But that baby was likely set up for that cancer when they were just an egg in their mama's ovaries, when the mom was in grandma developing as a little baby. And so these things go generations back. And so a lot of times when people think it's genetic or that it's passed on, not necessarily. What is passed on is how, you know, those bodies are operating, what is starting to, what are the things that they're being exposed to, environmental triggers, various toxins. This can go back several generations, putting you at risk for cancer. A tumor is a mere symptom of an underlying imbalance. And the DNA mutations are triggered by things that are in, on, and around us and only manifest if your mitochondria is unhealthy, if your body is unhealthy, if your terrain is unhealthy. Removing a tumor through surgery and chemo and radiation will not remove the cancer process that got you the cancer in the first place and that produced the tumor. In fact, they will definitely impact the tumor, but they will also impact the terrain, making it more toxic and more welcoming to a cancerous process to continue. How many of you have heard that before, where maybe you or a loved one did the chemo, did the radiation, went into remission, only to 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, have it come back and have it be more aggressive than before? It's because if we don't change the environment that got cancer there in the first place, how do we expect that the cancer is just going to stop because we removed a tumor from the body? And so today, what I want to show you is how we have to get rid of the somatic theory and the Western way of thinking and come up with a different approach. So this is from the National Cancer Institute. And the National Cancer Institute, when we talk about how cancer develops, you can see right at the beginning, it says cancer is a genetic disease. That is, it is caused by changes in genes that control the way our cells function, especially how they grow and divide. Genetic changes that cause cancer can happen because of errors occur as cells divide, of damage to DNA caused by harmful substances in the environment, such as chemicals in tobacco, smoke, and UV light from the sun, or they were inherited from our parents. They go on to say the body normally eliminates cells with damaged DNA before they turn cancerous, but the body's ability to do so goes down as we age. And this is part of the reason why there's higher risk of cancer later in life. So what they're saying here is that cancer is genetic and that it's something that's passed down to us. And as we age, we have less ability to correct these errors as these cells start to multiply and divide. And so therefore, we see it more often later in life. I would say that I disagree. I think that this is probably a process that could there be some genetic components. Yes, I'm not naive enough to think that there's nothing that genes have nothing to do with your cancering process, and I'll explain to you why in a minute. But I do not subscribe to the fact that you are just a victim of your genetics, that because you were born with the BRCA gene that you are destined for cancer. In fact, only about 5 to maybe 10%, if you're lucky, of cancerous really of the cancer process really has anything to do with your genetics. And 90 to 95% of the cancer process has everything to do with the body, the environment, the epigenetic expression of those genes that can influence whether or not you're going to have an issue. And so what I would encourage you to look into today, and what I'm going to be teaching you guys, is the metabolic theory or the metabolic approach to cancer. Let's see what that says. So the metabolic theory is that early cancers come and go and spontaneously regress. Established cancers can remain dormant, and changing the terrain may prevent progression and contribute to regression. And manipulating the microenvironment can and will halt or slow the progression and even reverse tumor growth. So what this metabolic theory is saying is that all of us have cancer cells. And that's been well documented. We all have cells in our body that are cancerous. We all have stem cells that can contribute, that can turn into a cancering process if we're not careful and if our body remains in a highly inflamed state. And so when someone comes to the wellness way, we are very, very clear in our terminology that we do not treat cancer. Treating cancer means that there's an issue that you need to give a drug to with the expectation that that drug will eliminate the tumor. That is not what we do here. If you go to see a wellness way doctor or practitioner and they are saying that they are treating your cancer, that is, you'll never hear that from one of our doctors, first of all. But our approach is not by taking a tumor, giving you an herb or giving you a list of herbs, and then expecting the tumor to go away. My approach is to make your body as healthy as possible, eliminating the triggers that caused that cancering process to occur in the first place, and trusting that your natural cells, that your innate immune response is going to be strong to be able to combat that. Now, let me be very clear. I am not against Western medical treatment of cancer. A lot of times, people get it wrong. Western medicine will say, this is the way, there's no other way. And natural people will say, this is the way, totally refuse conventional treatment. But I'm here to tell you there can be a very beautiful and. There can be a very beautiful combination between Western treatment and the wellness way approach. And when you put them together and really think critically on how to strategize the use of these treatments to maximize your outcomes is when you're going to get the best results. And so I want to teach you what are the things that make cancer cells so unique. So our next thing that we're going to go to is the hallmarks of cancer cells. So there are 10 things that make a cancer cell a cancer cell. And I'm going to put them all out here right now so that you can understand why people think that they're kind of scary. So these cancer cells, they evade growth suppressors. So there's different mechanisms that your body has that's supposed to suppress the growth of tumor cells or abnormal cells. And for whatever reason, those checks and balances, these cancer cells seem to evade these checks and balances. They seem to dodge them. Okay. It also can evade the immune system. I've had various patients that have an active cancer and we test their immune panel and it looks normal. But yet we know that they're fighting cancer because these cells can kind of put an invisibility cloak over them and kind of evade or dodge your natural immune response. It induces angiogenesis, which is a fancy word that says that, that it can cause tumor growth. It disables apoptosis, or it resists cell death. And so as cells are abnormal, they're supposed to die off and they're not becoming a problem. But sometimes these cancer cells, as they grow and multiply, they resist that cell death process. And so now they are, they seem to have immortality. It sustains proliferative signaling. So it signals to different parts of the body, hey, and it recruits people. It has different cells. It has a dysregulated metabolism, and I'm going to go into this in great detail on how a cancer cell thrives differently than a normal cell. It has enhanced replication, which enables the replicative immortality. And so because it can divide, it seems to be immortal. It doesn't seem to die off. Inflammation is something that can turn these cancer cells on, and cancer cells can cause inflammation in the body. There's the mutation and instability of the DNA. We can't rely on that DNA to produce a good functioning cell. And it has perturbed cell division that activates invasion and metastasis, so that dividing is thrown off. Okay, so these are the top 10 things that that create a cancer cell. But so a lot of times medical research is going into, well, how do we stop those things? This is, those same exact words. If you copy and paste that and put it into Google, you'll see lists of these in the literature, sustaining proliferative signaling, evading the immune system. These are the exact words that the literature uses. And so with the medical mindset, they say, okay, if we know these things about cancer cells, how can we target therapy? How can we target treatment to maybe stop angiogenesis or tumor growth, or stop this replication process, or to figure out how to take advantage of this dysregulated metabolism. And so the dysregulated metabolism is one thing that I do want to talk about in great detail, because I think it's finally something that is tangible, something that makes sense, and something that you can kind of start to connect some dots. And that comes from an effect called the Warburg effect. Now, the Warburg effect was discovered by Otto Warburg, I believe in the early 1900s. And what happens here is that there is a different metabolism for normal cells as there is in cancer cells. And as you can see in this image, what you can see is that the glucose is going to come down into a normal cell, and as it could turn into pyruvate with a process called glycolysis, and then the pyruvate is going to go into the mitochondria of the cell to produce energy. What happens in a cancer cell is that pyruvate doesn't break down and go into the mitochondria to produce energy. Instead, what it does is it converts into lactate. And lactate can thus decrease the pH of the environment. It can release lactate dehydrogenase. Now, why is that important? I'm going to go to my whiteboard over here, and my producer is going to bring that on for me, and I'm going to show you how the cellular metabolism can be altered and how it can be different by explaining to you kind of through pictures, because this is how I like to teach on how this works. So thank you, Joshua. All right, so going back to the Warburg hypothesis. Here we have a normal cell and a cancer cell, okay? So what happens is, in order to make great amount of energy, so we have the mitochondria here. And what happens is when a normal cell intakes glucose, so this is glucose. As the glucose goes into the cell, what's going to happen is that glucose is going to turn into pyruvate. This is the picture that I just showed you, okay? Now, this is through a process called glycolysis. And as pyruvate, in the presence when there is no oxygen, the pyruvate will go into the mitochondria and it will produce 2 ATP, okay? And so this is very inefficient for the cell to take in the glucose, turn it into pyruvate, that goes into the mitochondria and releases 2 ATP. ATP is a measure for energy, okay? So what happens is, in a highly oxidative environment, the cell can do better. So if we have oxygen all around here, now what happens is this is much more efficient when we have the oxygen in here. And what happens is, as the glucose goes into the cell, when it utilizes all this oxygen, it can actually not only create 2 ATP, but it can create 36 ATP. So in the presence of oxygen, a normal cell can produce 36 ATP through the intake of glucose, going through the glycolysis treatment, putting that into mitochondria. This is a process called oxidative phosphorylation. And this is much more efficient way to produce energy. So when you have all that energy, these cells can divide, they can become stronger, they can do as they were made to do, whether they're immune system cells or whatever, okay? Now in a cancer cell, what happens is even in the presence of oxygen, when it takes up the glucose, cell producing pyruvate, the pyruvate can't get into the mitochondria of the cell. And so if it does, and it goes through that glycolysis, this is only going to produce 2 ATP for energy. But even in spite of all this oxygen, it can't go through that oxidative phosphorylation, so it's not going to be able to produce 36 ATP. And so pyruvate is going to convert into something called lactate, okay? So if the cell is taking in more and more and more glucose, and we know that it's not going to be able to produce that oxidative phosphorylation and produce all that ATP, the only chance that your body has, or that cancer cell has to live, is by taking in more and more and more glucose. Because that is its source, its only source for energy, because the mitochondria of the cell aren't using the oxidative or the oxygen. Now, there were some theories that said, well, maybe the mitochondria of the cancer cell is the reason why that's not happening. That's not the case. We're finding that that is actually false information. But what we're finding is that this trend of this glucose in a cancer cell converting into lactate, there's a lot of theories. People don't know exactly why this happens, but this is a fermentation process. Okay, so think about it. How many of you have maybe had yeast overgrowth or something like that? And what do people advise? That you cut the sugar, because the sugar is this cell's life supply. And there's a lot of different literature out there that shows that yeast and a cancer cell operate very similarly. There's even some theories that people think that cancer originates as a yeast. So what happens is you can measure this lactate. And there's a marker called lactate dehydrogenase that if this is being released and you have high amount of lactate in your system, that means that lactate dehydrogenase, that means that this process is happening at a rapid rate, that there's a lot of those cells that are uptaking that glucose, and the only way that this cancer cell can make energy, ATP, is with more and more glucose. So, tip number one, if you're going through a cancering process, likely, there are some exceptions to the rule, but most of the time, like 99% of the time, you need to cut glucose completely from your diet. That's how you're going to starve this process from happening, so that that cancer cell can't make more ATP. But when you go into the chemotherapy and the radiation and all those other things, what are they doing? They're going around the carts with their warm cookies, and I'm telling you that a calorie is a calorie. It doesn't matter. They just don't want you losing weight. That's a time for a whole nother talk, that calories are not what prevents cachexia or muscle wasting. It's the type of nutrients and the calories that are coming through that's going to prevent that or not. And actually, it goes back to even World War II, when you had Jewish people that were in the Holocaust, and they were starving, and some very well-meaning American soldiers, when they were freed, came up and gave them a Snicker bar. Yeah, I'm finished with this. Thank you. So some very well-meaning American soldiers gave them a Snickers bar, thinking, oh my goodness, they're starving. Here, give them the sugar, like, let's fatten them up. And 2 or 3 weeks later, a lot of them died, because their body was in a different metabolic state. They weren't operating off of that glucose anymore. And now all of a sudden they flood it with the glucose, and their bodies couldn't handle it. Okay? And so 99% of the time, we want to get rid of that glucose so we can stop that process from happening. So what's happening is that when we feed that glucose, that fermentation process happens. And by measuring that lactate dehydrogenase, we can see, is there a fermentation process happening? Are those cancer cells being fed? Because if the normal cells are being fed, it's not producing that lactate, right? So that's one way that we can assess that, if that's happening or not. And so for my cancering patients that are actively cancering, I run a lactate dehydrogenase on them every single month. So we can start to course correct and make sure that they are doing what they need to with their diets to not be feeding into this process so that those cancer cells can finally starve. But that's only one area that can affect, a cancer cell and its presentation. So what activates these abnormal cells to begin with? Well, there's 10 main things that I think about when we talk about what is activating these abnormal cells. Obviously, genetics and epigenetic expression, and I'll get into that in a minute. Your blood sugar balance, your toxic burden, your microbiome and your digestive function, your immune function, inflammation, blood circulation and angiogenesis, your hormone balance, your stress and your biorhythms, and mental and emotional health. You see, this is very different than what a lot of the different, oncologists and different people are looking at, because they're not looking at the entire body as a Swiss watch. They're looking at just bits and pieces of these things that are activating these abnormal cells. And so when you come to a wellness way, what we'd like to do is be able to look at this from a full perspective of being able to see, okay, where are the places I can support you? And so a lot of times for my cancering patients, I do a whole heck of a lot of testing. Genetics and epigenetics, let's touch on that for a minute. So as I talked about earlier in this is not a genetic process. However, there are different things within your genetics that can make it more difficult for you to thrive and survive versus other people. If you have, say, like an MTHFR or a COMT genetic SNP, that means that your liver is a little bit more sluggish at getting rid of some toxic burden. And so for that reason, I know I need to support your liver. I need to care about your liver. I need to be looking into those liver enzymes, looking into a GGT, looking into your lipids to make certain that your liver is functioning at its best. BRCA is the most famous gene that comes to mind when you're with breast cancer. A lot of times people have removed their breasts because they're BRCA positive. Well, BRCA is a tumor suppressing gene. So the only reason, it doesn't mean that you're doomed to get cancer. The only way that the BRCA even matters is if there's a tumor that needs suppressing. But if there's no tumor, then having a tumor suppressing gene that's not as efficient as someone else doesn't really matter that much. And so again, coming back to cancer as a process, let's figure out what is happening within the body to remove that. Your blood sugar balance is number 2. I talked to you about why blood sugars are so dang important. And so if those, the very obvious PET scan in and of itself. What a PET scan is they put a dye into your system, and then those cells are going to uptick that glucose. That's what the dye is. It's a glucose. It's a sugar substance. And when the cancer cells eat it, they glow. Just the very premise of the PET scan showing you that the cancer cells are what's gobbling up the dye and the glucose to glow on a scan should be evidence that obviously there is a sugar component here. Okay, so balancing those blood sugars, getting them so that your blood sugars are not super high all the time feeding into this process is so darn important. Number 3 was toxic burden. There are so many toxins. I don't care how clean you think that you live. There are so many toxins that you are being exposed to every single day. If you live next to an airport, if you live within 2 miles of a gas station, if there is radon in your soil, if you live in the country and there are farmers around you spraying glyphosate, if you drink water out of plastic bottles, if you store your food in plastic containers, even if you go and get a grass-fed, grass-finished, meat, it's going to come packaged in plastic. I mean, there's no avoiding some of these things all over the place. And so we have a huge toxic burden, some people more than others. We're all born with a bucket, and eventually that bucket's going to overflow with all the different toxins and things and ways that we screw up our body's microbiome every single day. We're certainly not living in the Garden of Eden anymore. And so what happens is, some of this is unavoidable. Some of it is absolutely avoidable when we can start to make some of those changes into our lifestyle, the cleaning products that we use, the cookware that we use. There's so many different toxins that the cosmetics that we use. I get all my cosmetics from Poppy Avenue Clean Beauty Bar in Appleton, and everything that they have is organic. So that was a switch that I had to make, because cosmetics are they contain a lot of estrogen. A lot of estrogen containing materials, and Dr. Patrick will go into that more in detail of why we need to be concerned about that. Your microbiome and digestive function. I brought up this study for you. The microbiome in cancer, and the abstract says, microbiota and host form a complex superorganism in which symbiotic relationships confer benefits to the host in many key aspects of life. However, defects in the regulatory circuits of the host that control bacterial sensing and homeostasis, or alterations of the microbiome through environmental changes like infection, diet, or lifestyle, may disturb this relationship and promote disease. And so there's an increasing evidence indicates a key role for bacterial microbiota in carcinogenesis. And in this opinion article, we discussed the links between the bacterial microbiota and cancer, with a particular focus on immune responses, dysbiosis, genotoxicity, metabolism, and strategies to target the microbiome for cancer prevention. This is just one of a lot of different studies that are out there. I recently read another study that was suggestive that SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, is very correlated to pancreatic cancer, because some of that bacteria that's fermenting within that upper GI puts pressure against the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder. And so we have to be concerned about the changes that that's making for our pancreatic cancer patients. And so there has been, there's also another one I just was reading last night that was talking about N-butyrate, which is a type of short chain fatty acid, that the lack of N-butyrate can really be, prognostic for cancer progression. And what gets rid of N-butyrate from your system is leaky gut. It's the food allergies. It's all the things that we've been working on for a long time. And there is just article after article after article, and maybe I do a different one of these where I just lay out all of the research and show you that all of this has been found to connect to cancer. So if you're a current Wellness Way patient and you've done your food allergy testing, and you've done your stool testing, and you've had your immune system tested, think of how much further along you are in not being worried if this could happen to you. I would much rather you work on it now than while you're actively cancering and now trying to fix the microbiome and support the liver and support the detox pathways and do all of that while there's a cancer process going on. And so you are so much more ahead of it. And if you don't have a cancer diagnosis yet, think about all the different things you could be doing to prevent this in the future. So going back to the list, we have your immune function, inflammation. Have you had your immune system tested? Have you done your CD4s and CD8s? I know Dr. Patrick has talked about this ad nauseum. Have you been assessed for inflammation? Do you carry a lot of inflammation? Do you have those food allergies? And what is your oncologist doing to address your inflammation? That's something that I would ask. What is this doing to address my inflammation? Because if you're not taking any steps to address that inflammation, it's only going to further promote that cancering process. Blood circulation and angiogenesis. A lot of different targeted therapies or chemotherapies are targeting at a specific pathway for angiogenesis or tumor growth. But did you know that there's actually over 20 different pathways to stimulate that tumor growth? And if you're only targeting one, what's going to happen is the body is going to start to strengthen the other 20. And before you know it, that's going to, that's how your cancer becomes more and more aggressive, is because you're only targeting one aspect of all the different aspects that make up your cancering process. Hormone balance is huge. Dr. Patrick showed you a Dutch test and how when there's a lot of different hormones metabolizing down to 4-hydroxyestrone, that's something that can bind to and damage your DNA, putting you at risk for some of these cancers. Have you had your Dutch test looked at? Stress and biorhythms. Do you sleep when you should? Are you someone that works the night shift? Are you someone that has irregular sleep patterns? You're at higher risk for some of these things because that's not how our bodies were designed. That's not physiologically normal. And mental and emotional health. There's something called an ACE score, ACE, and you can look it up and you can take it for free online. And that ACE score stands for Adverse Childhood Event Score. There are a lot of traumas that have happened in people's past, whether you came from an abusive home or you had to fend for yourself in some areas or different things. It's a series of 10 questions. It's very quick for you to do. And if you have over 3 of those that are positive, there's been a positive correlation with people that have had more than 3 adverse childhood events, that they're something like 60% more likely to develop a cancer diagnosis later in life. So as parents, I take that personally. I take that where I want to do everything in my power to not contribute to my child's ACE score. Right? Because that's a really big thing. And so working through traumas and working through someone that can help you from a mental health perspective is also extremely important. So if you're like, okay, Nicole, I want to know, like, is my body healthy? Here's some basic labs that you can look at to assess your terrain. So a CBC with differential. This is the most basic lab on the planet, but if you're not taking it to someone who really understands your terrain, who really understands how your body works, they're likely missing things. When you're looking at your neutrophils and lymphocytes ratio with a differential, you want those to be about a 2-to-1 ratio or more. That's showing you have a good gut lining and there's not something underlying. You want to make sure you have a good hemoglobin, hematocrit, platelets, all of those things to make sure that that's looking great. Your CMP is looking for your liver enzymes, your electrolytes, your calcium. You don't want your calcium higher than 9.5. You want to look at your sodium levels and your potassium and your liver enzymes. You don't want your liver enzymes to be elevated. If your AST is greater than your ALT, the most common reason that happens is if you are consuming too much alcohol. So maybe it's important to get a check on that. Your HSCRP is looking for an overall inflammation. You need this number to be less than 1. People that have a CRP chronically over 1 are at higher risk for cancering process. Your ESR, SED rate, another marker for overall inflammation. LDH, that's that lactate dehydrogenase I was talking to you about before. Are you taking in too much sugar that's causing that process to happen? And the LDH isoenzymes can show me, kind of pinpoint where in the body that process may be happening. Your vitamin D3 is actually not a vitamin, it's a hormone, and that's important for your good immune function and energy and hormone balance. Homocysteine, giving me a clue for your methylation status and how your liver is doing. Your hemoglobin A1C and your insulin, showing me where is your blood sugars normally. Ferritin, you need that between 35 and 75. Much lower, your body is depleted of oxygen. Much higher, it can actually cause some damage to your organs and slow some of those processes down. You can check an immune panel, you can check a Dutch test, you can see your hormone balances, you can do stool testing, and if you haven't done any of these things, you have no idea whether or not you are just a sitting duck waiting for cancer to happen to you. But there are steps that you can make today to prevent having cancer in the first place. And you might say, well, you know, I'm taking medications that are balancing my blood sugars and decreasing inflammation and helping me with my gut microbiome. Well, hang on, because there are most of the common medications that most Americans are on are actually actively promoting a cancerous process. Let's take a look at some of those. So common risk factors found in everyday medication: seizure meds, birth control, hormones, and statins. These can lead to chronically low fat-soluble nutrients and B vitamins. Steroids, even a single dose of steroids can cause the low vitamin D3, potassium, and selenium levels. Anti-inflammatory meds lowers your calcium, D3, potassium, selenium, folate, B2, vitamin C, and your homocysteine levels can start to go up. Antifungals destroys fat-soluble vitamins. Metformin very common for blood sugars. It destroys your CoQ10, which is a very key component from good mitochondrial health, your riboflavin and your B12. Your antacids, it removes all minerals, all electrolytes. It destroys your blood sugar balancing act, which is paramount for cancer. It takes out your zinc, B12, folate, D3, and your protein. Beta blockers, a type of heart medication, wipes out your CoQ10. Laxatives takes out your fat-soluble vitamins. Psych meds depletes all B vitamins and CoQ10. B vitamins keep coming up here because B vitamins are so important to good mitochondrial health, to good energy production, to helping your liver to get rid of toxins. You need B vitamins, and if you're taking some of these things and you're depleting your body of those and not going back and replenishing them, likely you're contributing to a cancering process and you don't even realize it. You know, there's a lot of different things that you can do strategically. I told you before that it doesn't have to be a balance between Western medicine, or that it doesn't have to be an either or, Western medicine and natural, that it's a very great strategy to put them together. So I'm saying, what about this? Have you thought about these sorts of things? How about when someone has a lumpectomy or they're having a breast removed because they have a tumor growing in there and they want a clean slate? Did you know the timing of that surgery could really contribute to whether or not that cancer progresses? On days about 19 through 21 of a woman's cycle, all of her hormones are at their peak. That's when those hormones are going to be activating those receptors within the fat cells. You're not going to want to do a surgery on day 19 through 21 of your cycle when those are all being activated. That could actually cause it to spread even more. Instead, why don't you plan for that to be taken on day 1, 2, 3 of your cycle, where all of your hormones are at their lowest, that they'll be all month long, so that those receptors aren't being triggered, and then you'll have better outcomes then because you're not doing it while those hormones are more active in your system. Like, that's a strategy that seems very elementary, but it's revolutionary to someone who doesn't think like us. Because the timing of your surgery, I'm not saying don't get the surgery, I'm saying wait until you have a better outcome or better prognosis when you take into account the physiology. I showed you how cancer cells take in glucose and how they need it for energy. And in that same way, the radiation is going to go into those cells. And when you have high insulin or that insulin resistance, that's going to block how that glucose can enter the cell. And so when you have high insulin or high amounts of glucose, we don't want to take that radiation and drive the glucose into the cell even further, right? Because that's going to further exacerbate that cancering process. And so before you do radiation, we got to make certain that you're in a ketogenic state, that glucose is down to nothing. So when they take a radiation and drive it specifically into the cell, they're not taking that glucose along with it. Radiation hangs out in the body for 6 to 12 months. It continues to do its thing. So it's important that you're not just like doing a ketogenic or a low glycemic index or a no sugar diet for just the time where you're getting the radiation, but then continuing it on for at least 6 to 12 months after that process is continued. And if you really want to get thrifty, you can do a radiation. So you're in a ketogenic state, radiation therapy into the cell, and then you can drive it even further into the cell with something like a hyperbaric chamber or something like that. There are strategies in which you can do to make conventional treatment stronger and not be stupid about it. Why are you going to give yourself chemotherapy and expose yourself to all those poisons, and then over here give yourself all the glucose that's furthering strengthening those cells? Chemotherapy can destroy all of the cells, good and the bad. But what it doesn't destroy is the stem cells, the parent cells that started the cancering process in the beginning. And if we don't change the environment, if we don't change the body, if we haven't gotten rid of the inflammation, if we haven't gotten rid of the toxic burden, if we haven't balanced the microbiome, then those stem cells will present again. And that's how cancer comes back. So they might pat themselves on the back, hey, we got rid of the tumor, hey, we got rid of the process, but it will come back if we don't change the environment and the process that started that cancering in the first place. So what does true prevention look like? It's not going every single month to radiate your breast tissue, because that's destroying good cells. But what it really looks like is, number one, take inventory. I hope as you were listening to me, you started thinking about all the different toxic burdens and the stressors and the microbiome that may or may not be imbalanced, and the hormones that may or may not be imbalanced, and all the things in your body that really aren't operating at their best. Like, take inventory. What in your life could be currently a risk factor? Maybe you're eating way too much sugar. Maybe you have a high amount of mental stress. Like, what is it that could be putting you at risk? Number two, get tested. Have you tested your immune system? Have you looked into your microbiome, your hormones, your food allergies, your different markers that I had mentioned earlier, some of those things, looking into the inflammation in your body? Number three, see a Wellness Way doctor or practitioner. Let us help you understand the data and come up with a plan before it's too late. Or maybe you are actively cancering and you're like, gosh, like, I just need my body to become healthier so I don't have to worry about this coming back. It's never too late to get started. It's never too late to make changes. Making changes to your diet, your lifestyle, your microbiome now is only going to help you to recover even better. And maybe you need to start to strategize how to use some of these conventional therapies alongside getting your body as healthy as possible. And number four, get to work. Statistically, less than 12% of people have the discipline to follow the plan and lead an anti-cancer lifestyle. You can be one of them. So I hope that this encouraged and inspired you guys today to think about things differently. Cancer isn't just something that happens to people. It's something that's been building up over years and years and years. And it's never too late to start to prevent it. It's never too late to take the active steps that you need to get your body in the right place, where if you have a cancer diagnosis, or you've had one in the past, or your family has had one, that there are things that you can do today to decrease your risk and to make certain that you're not living in fear, wondering if you're going to somehow get cancer today. But working together to make sure you have a strengthened microbiome, that your mental stress is down, that you have, you're keeping your inflammation down, that you're working on all those different processes, means that you don't have to live in fear, because those cells can only present as cancer cells in a sick body. But if you can get your body healthy, and you can work on that extracellular matrix and work on the mitochondrial health, you've got nothing to worry about. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you next time on A Different Perspective.
Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream. Also, share this video with a friend. Once again, thank you for watching.
And we're back. And
Here we are.
I'm not Dr. Patrick Flynn.
And I'm certainly not Dr. Patrick Flynn.
I'm Dr. Jeremy Maxwell with the Wellness Way, Columbia, Missouri.
And I'm Dr. Laura Hemgren. I'm with the Wellness Way in Iron Mountain, Michigan.
We're glad to be with you guys today and kind of close out the show. It's a great opportunity to be in front of you guys. Although we don't get to see you every Saturday. I know we both are in agreement.
Watching.
You guys are really a part of our family, as over the last many years, we have been a part of the Wellness Way. It's something that we're very passionate about.
In such a way that it's totally encompassed our life, everything that we do and everything that we try to teach to you.
Yeah. So as we know, as individual owners of offices, and we understand the idea behind the Wellness Way and what Dr. Patrick Flynn has kind of set in motion many years ago, we know we can't do it by ourselves.
No, and we were there many years ago.
Yeah, many of you guys don't know this, that the three of us actually went to chiropractic school together. I didn't really know Dr. Patrick that much. I know you and Dr. Patrick knew each other.
He had a massive impact in the direction that I went with the chiropractic philosophy, understanding the 3 T's, which we call trauma, toxins, and thoughts, which is what he teaches every single day to all of you patients. He had a huge impact on the direction that I went through chiropractic school, which is really fun. Yeah. And then to find him later, such a beautiful thing. Even better.
Even though the three of us really took different paths, we were still very passionate about one thing, and that was we knew as chiropractors we had a great gift to people about doing life better, doing life differently, because we knew even 22 years ago.
Not that many for me. See, it's his birthday today. He's 48 today. We need to celebrate that.
We'll get there. We will get there. But 22 years ago, we had a broken healthcare system. And again, we took different paths, but for me, it was 5 years ago. For you, it was 7 or 8 years ago, maybe more.
Yeah, almost 10.
That, you know, we've all began this reconnecting with Dr. Patrick Flynn, and to hear that message that the Wellness Way has, for me, it's like my passion for chiropractic continues to
completely
get,
rejuvenate it.
Higher and higher every day. And so in that, we've taken steps to invest not only personal time, but money into other clinics across the United States. I know personally, we're involved with a clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, St. Peters, Missouri, North Phoenix, Arizona.
Absolutely, same as us. We've been very involved with not only Iron Mountain, but also Louisville in Colorado, Jacksonville in Florida. We have the same office that we worked in, both Thomas and I, in Ireland, to Discover Chiropractic in Ireland. And then also we just opened Wellness Way Marquette with Katie Leto, which is so fun.
Yeah,
it's
totally
so fun.
Awesome. So, you know, not only together as doctors are we doing our best to join together and get this message out, we rely heavily on you guys, and we appreciate what you do to continue to pass not only the Wellness Way name around, but the idea behind what we do. And I think I not only speak for myself, but everybody that is a doctor within this clinic, we really have a heart for joining with you guys, because we know that if you do life with us, your life will be better, your health will be better, your families will be better, your relationships will be better, because I wholeheartedly believe that the idea that we share with people will radically transform health going forward. And so we're not trying to replace the medical system. We're trying to help everyone understand that what we have is a separate and distinct actual healthcare system.
Absolutely, and we need your help. And I think Patrick does a very beautiful job of explaining that and giving you tools to be able to teach and help your families to understand this, and from, like he says, from a completely different perspective. But we're trying to do that every day as well, and knowing that we have all of you to be able to try to do that for us on a daily basis in different ways, in ways that you know are going to hit the mark a little bit better. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
So we're there to walk with you guys. We're there to lead you on a different path, a better path compared to what many of you've been on before. And so, like myself, I didn't really see the future the way Dr. Patrick did, but then when he shared what that looked like, I was willing to get on board and be a faithful follower, because I knew it was leading me and my family and our clients and patients to a better life. So I'm asking you guys to join with us, continue to share that message with your friends, with your families, because the Wellness Way is going to continue to make a huge impact going forward.
Crucial. And I love the fact that, too, I came around this because of the fact that I wanted to be able to provide hope. And I think that, for me, was one of the most crucial elements in order to be able to make this move and go somewhere. So giving people hope, and also giving people a sense of responsibility in their role, and that it's okay to feel innately and instinctively that you know something is really important, and you are able and completely willing and know the path that you should take in order to make that work for you. So we're going to give you all those tools. Just keep watching.
Yes, keep watching every week. Continue to like and share all of the sites with your friends. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys again next week. I'm Dr. Jeremy Maxwell with the Wellness Way, Columbia, Missouri.
And Dr. Laura Hemgren with the Wellness Way in Iron Mountain, Michigan.
You guys have a great weekend.
Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream.